when I sent out the email, Rob Kingslow said he was willing, to talk on 3 topics. One of them was the geothermal, the other was climate change, and the third was sustainable development. I said, well, sustainable development, because Rob just completed his master's degree in sustainable development from Hawaii Pacific University. But I've known Rob for the past years. When I first met with him, he shared with me he is a trained aerospace engineer. Can you imagine that? But he also was working with land trusts in Bologna, California, in restoring their wetlands there. So that's a kind of interesting, project that you're working on. And since, over the years, at least from 2007, when he became the executive coordinator for Hawaii's Interfaith Power and Light. So he comes from that perspective as well. So we'll have Rob talk to us about sustainable development and explain that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. I just finished a master's in sustainable development at HPU, and so I'm kind of full of it. I have a lot of stuff to say. And so I hope to change your minds a little bit tonight. Maybe not change your mind, but expand your minds as to just what is sustainable development. And so I'm going to maybe go quickly, maybe slowly, depending on how you guys are giving me feedback. I really like to always start with the frame, because I'm a filmmaker too, and so I like to start with what's inside the frame. And so what I'm going to talk about tonight is I'm going to use the metaphor of the canoe. Canoes are a strong metaphor for family, for ohana, for living together in Hawaii, because the ancient Polynesians got here on canoes. And so the Earth itself is a canoe, if you think about it. We're an island, we're a canoe floating in a sea of space. And so I just want to frame my talk tonight by saying we're all in a canoe, pulling together and reaching for something that's expanded, something that's new, something that's different from the way we've been conducting our affairs over the last 200 years. We're going to touch on ecological economics, we're going to touch on sustainable development, and then I'll talk a little bit about HIPL, which Chuck briefly mentioned earlier. This is the Earth in a sunbeam. So the Voyager spacecraft, they turned it around when they got 4 billion miles away from the sun, and they took a picture of the Earth. And there we are. Right now, in a way, we could be in that beam of sunlight right this very moment. Pain, all the suffering, all the wars, all the love, everything that's part of human history and that's not part of human history. Everything, indeed, that happened on Earth happened on that little mote, that little beam, that little blue dot, it's called, the blue dot photo. And so I like to point out that here we are today on the Earth, and we're in a canoe floating through space, through sunbeams, and there's no one around. There's nobody going to come and rescue us. There's nobody going to come and change our minds for us. We have to make these choices for ourselves, in my view. And indeed, the choice is where our personal power lies. I don't know if you guys have actually seen this one before, but this is another picture of Earth. The Apollo spacecraft came around the side of the moon and took this picture of Earth. 2 years after this picture was circulated widely, the first Earth Day happened. And you know that in a few days it'll be Earth Day. And so for me, this picture is oneness. We look at this picture as humans and we go, we are one. We can see that it doesn't matter how many divisions we have and how many problems we have with each other. If we're truly searching for who we are, we can really see that we are one. And for me, that's the essential standing point that I like to start from in my presentation about sustainable development. And so here's the canoe. This is a depiction of ancient Polynesian canoe. And, they went off into this sea of space, or this space of sea, and they discovered Hawaii. And what I'm going to try to do tonight is help you to see sustainable development in a new way. And so it's a voyage, but it's also a voyage of seeing things in a new way. I also use a set of 3 questions to frame my interrogative tonight. This, by the way, is Haleakala, and this is the Milky Way galaxy. It's enhanced a little bit to show, but here we are standing on Earth looking out. Before we were out on the moon or out in space looking in, now we're on the Earth looking out. And we can indeed see the wonder of creation. See just how infinitesimal in a way we are, but yet we can also look around us today and see how radically we've changed our world. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is, who are we? Do we care about sustainable development? Do we care about sustainability? Do we care about the Earth? Do we care about each other? Do we care? Who are we? And I think that most of us do care. And even those who are seemingly don't care, they actually care, but their heart is hardened or covered up with all the anxiety and stress that's in our world. And then we need to really ask ourselves, not where are we going because of what we've done, because that's a projection. And we can see that if we project from where we are, we're going to end up in a bad place. But we really need to ask ourselves a central question of sustainable development is, where do we want to go? What do we prefer? Do we prefer a different life? Do we prefer a different way of living? Do we prefer our children to have a better life? Do we prefer to be better people? And that answer will inform us. Because the next question is then, how do we get there? How do we move towards this place that we prefer? Not the place that somebody else prefers. Not the place that our government wants us. Not the place that all these forces that are on the planet that are arrayed against us or with us or across purposes to us. Not those purposes, but what do we prefer? In sustainable development, this is called backcasting. You've heard of forecasting. That's industrial development. Industrial development says the past is an indicator of the future. You've heard, and when your stock investment portfolio drops, your financial advisor says, the past is not an indication of future performance. Well, the reason it's not an indication of future performance is because they're projecting from the past. And the past has been stable, and the future is changing, is becoming more volatile. So we need to answer these three questions in order to practice sustainable development. And we've been through it before. Humans have been through great transitions. When we discovered fire as humans, I mean, how big did that change our lives? That really changed us from cave dwellers to maybe even out on the prairies now, and feeling more in control of our environment, maybe even shaped our industrial mindset. And then language. Can you imagine not being able to understand me, or me to even have an expectation that you would understand me? That seems incomprehensible to us, but humans have been through that transition of discovering language and learning how to communicate with each other. And then agriculture. Agriculture was a pretty big one, because then we can now store food, we can create food, and our populations can grow beyond what our resources allow us, our harvesting resources or whatever resources we have accumulated. So we have agriculture, we can grow food for our future children, we can even store it, we can even sell it to other people, we can even trade it with other people. Agriculture was a big transition. And that happened about 12,000 years ago. And then what we're all living in the tail end of is the Industrial Revolution. And this was enabled by fossil fuels, which are cheap, dense energy that's never going to be produced again on this planet, at least in our human time scale. And so this cheap, easy, energy-dense fuel has given us the lifestyle we have today. I mean, everything that we're using to talk about this to you tonight was enabled by fossil fuels. And yet, the cheap, easy, dense fossil fuels are gone, scientists say. And indeed, most of that is now in the atmosphere, climate change or ocean acidification or whatever. And so we're having these deep problems of our industrial way of life. So what's the next transition? Well, no one knows, because it's a paradigm shift. We're going through it. It's happening. And so the question is it sustainable development? Well, I don't know that for sure. But I am going to present sustainable development in a way that I believe that we could use sustainable development theory and practice and behaviors and values to light our path forward. If you want to step even farther away and call it something else, you might call it conscious evolution, where there's an evolving of human spirit and evolving of human behaviors that is consciously chosen. And so you could call conscious evolution, maybe, if you wanted to go to that broad brushstroke of transition description. Pretty striking photo, huh?
Yeah.
Now, to me, it brings to mind our predicament. Here we are in a sea of space. This is a desert, a metaphor for a sea of space. And we have all these people hanging off this place called Earth, or off this thing called society, or off this train called industrialism. And in our case, we really don't have a driver. We just have all these people shouting at the guy at the steering wheel, saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. All of our dollars voting for everything that we want, telling longliners to go out and hook leatherbacks and swordfish because we want a swordfish steak. So that's even worse than this, because at least these people kind of sort of signed up for the deal and actually went along with the driver saying, I'm going to drive across the desert. And so the metaphor kind of breaks down here, but really, in a way, here we are on the Earth, driving through space, driving through the desert, looking for a destination. So we have a threefold crisis. We know that we're at the intersection of environmental volatility. So much carbon in the atmosphere now that it's beyond the 850,000 year range of carbon in the atmosphere. And so there's no historical precedent for the speed and concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so we don't know if we're going to get hot or cold or where it's going to be hot or cold, but we know that we're in a period of volatility. And so that in itself, for the last 12,000 years, is a tremendous change in our environmental conditions. So we have social stress. I mean, 7 billion people on the planet. You know, we're going to have resource stresses. We're going to have social stresses. Our institutions are linear, and things are happening exponentially. And this is the institutional dysfunction that we have. And we can look around us every day and see examples of institutional dysfunction, of our organizations not providing the outcomes that are good for people. The fact that CEOs make 450 times what the average worker makes is just one indication of institutional dysfunction. And so we'll keep with this metaphor of threes. And, you know, we can say that there are this intersection of problems that are happening. Resource depletion, we talked about that. You know, these things happen. And then we have the internet that is bringing transparency to every corner of human behavior almost. And if that continues, will give us the information, give us the understanding to radically change what we want to do and how we do it. And then we have the intersection of another element here called increasing expectations, which it means to say that everybody in all those other countries that don't have the lifestyle we have because they don't have access to the fossil fuel that we've had for the last 100 years are expecting to have a middle class. They're expecting to have cars and appliances and pure clean water and clean air and a middle class lifestyle. So we have this knotty problem that exists at the intersection of declining resources and increasing transparency and also increasing expectations from the very people that are on this planet. And these are just all the stakeholders and all the examples of all of those three categories. So this actually is the potential for sustainable value creation, is at the intersection of all of these problems and opportunities. So the main thing I want to talk to you about is this empty world versus full world concept in sustainable development. This is another main principle of sustainable development. You know, 300 years ago, just 300 years ago, you know, maybe 10 generations, it was a fairly empty world. There weren't many people on the planet. And this is a scene from old Hawaii, and you can see it looks like something we'd all want to live in. That is until we realized we didn't have smartphones. Then we'd all be upset. So the world was big, the people were small. And our economy, which is really just a set of relationships and behaviors and values and practices that we use to interact with each other to produce some type of prosperity or lifestyle, our economy was kind of scaled for the amount of people that were on the earth. Kind of, sort of. It really didn't have this exponential shape to it that it does today. But yet today we have 7 billion people on the planet, and here we are in Waikiki with, you know, beautiful rainbow and high expectations and all these tourists coming in, and, you know, wow, we're in good shape. But we're in a full world. You know, the fossil fuel problems that we have with costs are increasing, and we have all these people asking for resources and needs, and our economy is now a huge fraction of the earth. We're basically consuming the earth at an exponential rate because of all these people. Impact is equal to population times affluence times technology is the typical kind of way to look at it. Impact of humans is equal to population times affluence of the people, which is really directly related to fossil fuels, times the technology, which is also related to fossil fuels. So the engine behind it all is this thing called Neoclassical Economy. And this is what we're still operating under, this set of principles, values, behaviors called the Neoclassical Economy. And it really is just this. This is all it is. In all the advanced economic course books you see, it's just a circulatory pattern. It's a circle. Circle sounds great, except that it's going from firms, which are organizations or corporations, to households. The goods and services are being produced. Customers are giving them money. Households and people are getting wages, rents, and dividends, and the factors for production are going back to the firms to produce the goods and services. So you don't see any earth in there. You don't see any people in there. You don't see much at all except this circulation pattern. And actually, that's the problem. It's an abstraction. It's an abstracted process that has nothing to do with reality. I did a compare and contrast on the industrial world and the assumptions of the industrial world. Neoclassical economics was built when the world was empty, when there were very few people on the planet. So resources seemed infinite. So it didn't seem like there was going to be much worry. When I was in high school, I said, "Grandpa, can you loan me $10,000 so I can go to the Amazon?" And he said, "No, the Amazon will always be there." And I believed him. And I didn't go. And now we can see what the challenge is. I wish I'd gone. You know, so empty world. Isolated from nature. A macroeconomic view, which means to say this is the big picture, not the micro picture of interactions between people. There's a problem with allocation. All of us are we could probably be considered part of the middle class. But the neoclassical economy does not allocate resources very well. It believes in infinite growth. It's abstraction, as I said, and it believes that things are infinitely substitutable. We run out of one thing, we can just substitute something else, because technology and human ingenuity and innovation will always keep up with resource depletion. No limits, all the costs are externalized, no morality in here. In other words, no concern for what is best for humans or nature. Believes in capital, financial capital only. Homo economicus, that's a really interesting thing, because the atom of the neoclassical economy is a Neanderthal, basically, a hunter-gatherer who has no concern for everything, and he's only concerned about his own needs and desires. That's the model that neoclassical economy built this whole system on, was this model, and it forces us, in a way, you can see how we get forced into that model, even though that's not the case. We have altruism all around the place, but we get forced into this selfish, rent-seeking kind of, I am only going to think about my own concerns because I got to make money, I got to pay bills, I got to put gas in my car, I got to feed my family. You know, these things are the result of this neoclassical economy, is what I'm saying. So big problem. So our economy measures GDP, gross domestic product, and we measure GDP as a result of having a neoclassical economy. But what GDP does not measure is all of these things over here. It measures these rather well, which are all financialized investments. And it does a little bit of doing this, but it doesn't measure these things at all. And so we have an economy that's just totally out of touch with who we are as humans. And this is the main problem that sustainable development tries to address. And the other thing that we have a problem with is if you think of change or adaptability or resilience versus time, you can see that all the processes of the human are going exponential. In other words, our use of carbon, our use of fuel, our population, our use of paper, our use of water, the pollution, all of these things are going exponential. And yet our institutions and the way humans themselves are actually responding to these are linear. In other words, I mean, how difficult is it to get this church to do something new? Yeah? I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, how difficult is it to get anybody to do something new? We have to be convinced of it. Then we have to be shown examples. And then we have to go, okay, that's good for me. And then we got to go, okay, now how do I incorporate it in my life? So that's linear. And the question is, if all this is going exponential, how are we as humans going to adapt? How are we going to change our linear behavior to a transformative, adaptive behavior? And that's not clear. And to conclude, before the Earth collapses between the strain of man-made destruction, we will be able to make a great big profit from its remaining resources. So you can see the health of the planet's going down, the profit's going up, and all these guys are smiling back here, and this guy's doing a great sales job. And this really does seem to be where we are today. Ecosystems collapsing, man-made profit going up. It's challenging to see how we're going to get from where we want to go to where the right-minded folk of us want to be. But there's a way to do it. We can move towards sustainability in a way that's adaptive and proactive. The Brundtland Commission first defined sustainable development in 1987 as development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Okay, wow, great, perfect. It's a great guideline, but what does it mean? Well, it turns out that there are two different types of sustainability: weak sustainability and strong sustainability. Weak sustainability is what we're trying to practice now with triple bottom line. It holds total capital. In other words, I mean natural capital, all those trees and minerals and waters and intersections of all those ecosystems out there, and human constant, and assumes they're substitutes, which is just an incremental approach from what we got today. And then strong sustainability says, look, natural capital is too valuable to waste. We should really not be diminishing natural capital at all. And assumes that human capital and natural capital are complements, that they complement each other, much like you would think of peanut butter and jelly complementing each other. You can imagine that if the price of peanut butter went up, the price of jelly might also. And so the peanut butter and jelly sandwich might go up. But complements then complement each other. They're not substitutes for each other. And so there's a resource limit that we have to take care of. So economic growth converts natural capital to human-built capital, goods, and services. That's exactly what we've been doing for the last 150 years. And this is the standard weak sustainability model. People, profits, and planet. You've probably all seen this. Equity, livability, viability. In the middle, we practice sustainability. Well, it's weak sustainability model. Not the least of which is that profits circle is as big as the people circle is as big as the planet circle, which doesn't show the scale of the accumulated destruction to date. So this is really kind of a weak model for sustainability or sustainable development. As a result, what we're trying to move away from is this take, make, waste model, which is what we have today. You take stuff from the earth, you run it through some type of process, a production process, and then you throw it away in the landfill after it's done. That's the take, make, waste. It's not even aloha. Aloha is, reciprocity. This is half of reciprocity. There's nothing going back into the earth to restore. And then the stronger sustainability model that I'm going to talk about is this nested model. It says that economics should serve people and people should serve the planet, basically. And now you can start to see that there's a stronger theoretical visual model for our behavior. Everything should be in service to the people and the planet. The economy should be scaled according to that relationship. So in partnership economics, which we're hoping to shoot for, and we're calling that an adaptive response to the way things are today, economy should be a subset of the environment, not the other way around. Right now, economists think that the environment is a subset of the economy, that the economy is the most important thing. Not true. The growth in population consumption levels is not sustainable. Renewable resources must be harvested at less than the rate of natural replenishment. Well, that makes sense. You put money in your bank account, you spend less than what you put in. That makes sense, right? And this is renewable resources, not non-renewable resources, but renewable. And non-renewable resources must be recycled, and use must decline because population continues to rise. So we can't even use the same amount. This is the alternative model that we're trying to promote in sustainable development, is the borrow, use, return model. And so we use these things, we borrow them from nature, we use them if we have to for our economic activity, and then return them, restore them, recirculate them. There's this reciprocity now with the planet, with that little blue ball in the middle of space. Okay, so let's compare and contrast a little bit just to give you a really quick summary of industrial development, which we've had for the last 150 years, and sustainable development. Growth versus development. You know, two different things. Growth is development, you know. We're not a snowball. We just can't keep getting bigger. But we can develop. We can get better. There's absolutely no reason, no limit that humans' potential can't be increased well beyond what it is today. There's no reason. Look at what we've done so far in terms of our development. Certainly. Natural capital is the most important thing in sustainable development. Financial capital is the most important thing in industrial development. Process. What is the processes that we're using? What are the products that we are making? Quality versus quantity. I mean, look how far away from quality we've gotten in our lives. Holism versus mechanism. You know, there's a certain oneness to all of God's creation. And we're just tearing it apart. Collaboration versus competitiveness. This is the big one for me as I get out of school and I see competitiveness everywhere. In nonprofit world, everywhere. It really has been an eye-opener. Potential versus productivity. Scale, distribution, and allocation. This is the one we're going to talk about in the next couple slides. And allocation, I'll talk about that. Intergenerational needs, between generations, and intra-generation wants. So right now we got a model that promotes gimme, 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 me, in my generation right now. We're stealing the future to give us lifestyle in the present. And sustainable development says, no, no, no. We need to have an intergenerational dialogue, and we have to evaluate the needs of future generations so that we can scale our own activities. So this is the sustainable development model that describes what a sustainable development practitioner should look like. And this is the minimum set of things. It's a multidisciplinary practitioner. So if you see yourself in one of these four circles in terms of your life's work, then that's good. If you see yourself in multiple circles, then you may be considered a sustainable development practitioner. So this is kind of an academic minimum that we like to see for sustainable development practitioners. Natural sciences, health sciences, management, which is business, and social sciences, which is studying ourselves. Ray Anderson, this famous businessman who took Interfaith carpet from a polluting, oil-burning carpet manufacturer to one of the most efficient, sustainable companies on the planet, said, what is the business case for ending life on Earth? There is none. There is none. Here we are in terms of footprint. Okay, so just think of this as a supply-demand curve. You got supply right here, that's the Earth. And you got demand here, that's us. And this is just the number of planet Earths that we need to supply all of those demands. And really, we only have one. We can't go any farther beyond one. But we're well up here. We're in debt. In other words, we're eating up future generations' resources. And so the question is, how do we bend this curve down below this biocapacity reserve line, below what the Earth can regenerate every year? And this is our main challenge. This is what sustainable development seeks to address, is the bending of this curve here down so that in future generations we end up out here below that. And so you can look at this another way. You can look at gross national product here versus time, and you can see that as population increased, we are converting nature into built environment. This is clearly portrayed here. When natural capital is abundant and human capital is scarce, we could consume natural capital to enhance human capital. But today, now when human capital is abundant and natural capital is scarce, we must conserve and enhance natural capital. So this is a major theme of sustainable development. It's called the sigmoid curve. So here's another look at it, ecological carrying capacity. In all of our science, in all of our observation on the planet, there's only two types of population behaviors over time. This is the number of individuals versus time, and this is K, which is the carrying capacity. There's another way of looking at the supply-demand curve. One type of behavior, which is called an R-selected biology. Rabbits display this. They eat and eat and eat and eat, and the number of individuals increases till they overshoot their carrying capacity. And then, boom, they're out of food. And they die. And they die back well below where they started, where they were before, and they bounce around down here till something changes and they find more resources, or they never do. Now, this is what the path that currently humans are on. And this is called K-selected biologies, and bears do exhibit this behavior. They go up and up until they start leveling off below the carrying capacity of their environment. And the question is, which one are we? And the answer is, right now we don't know yet. We have examples of this behavior in human history, and the question is, will we exhibit this behavior this time around with 7 billion people on the planet? And what this really means up here is leveling off is the numbers of people being born, or the number of bears being born, decreases, or a lot of people die, or a lot of bears die to decrease that thing. So this is where we're at today. I mean, the scientists say by 2050, population is going to level out. That's well within either our lifetimes or our children's lifetime. Because that's the question. That's the choice that humans have. So here's the thing that comes from ecological economics. I like to talk about this one because it's called an economic Limsoll Line. Now, a Limsoll Line is an interesting concept on a boat. It's these lines here. It's how high can you load the boat before you end up getting it below the waterline or before it's unstable. Harbor masters, the world around, wanted to know the boats that are coming into harbor, how heavy are they loaded? Number one, maybe for taxes, but number two, they didn't want any boat capsizing into harbor and blocking up their business for years and years and years. So they came up with this idea of a Limsoll line. And this is an indication of scale. If the boat is the earth, and the cargo is the people and their stuff, and the things we've converted from natural capital to human capital or to stuff capital, then we need an economic Limsoll line. This line says, when is enough enough? How heavy can you load the boat? How much can you put in it? How is it allocated among the crew? Where is it distributed across the boat itself? We need this type of policy-making instrument in our economics, and right now we don't have that. So that's the concept of an economic Limsoll line. And the questions we would ask here, how big is our economic subsystem relative to our canoe? How big can it be without sinking our canoe? How big should it be in order to optimize life in our canoe? So these are progressively more complicated questions that we need to ask to create this policy instrument. Here we are. I mean, I can see my family in this picture, even though this isn't my family. But look back here. This is the generations past. We've been living pretty high on the hog for a while. And the question is this something that's going to continue? This is now talking about innovation versus time. So we have these scientists, technologists, says that technology is going to move us beyond where we are, that technology is going to save us, that we could just substitute more minerals for the things we run out of, substitute things for trees, substitute things for, like we're trying to now build carbon collectors instead of looking really seriously at how many trees we could plant on the planet. And so this is called the innovation curve, and it's really a hope-based philosophy. Are we going to adopt these biomimicry, green chemistry, industrial ecology, renewable energy, green nanotechnology, sustainability? Are we going to do that in order to kind of leapfrog out of where we are into the future? We're still unsure whether that's going to happen. So this is one of my favorite things because I do work in the nonprofit sphere a lot. We have the three sectors of human society, at least civilized human society or Western society: civil, business, government. And Marjorie Kelly has a really interesting book on ownership. And so we need a fourth sector that combines all of these. It's not a public-private land development corporation, which is mostly private and not a lot of public. It's a fourth sector, an altruistic sector of society that Marjorie Kelly says we need a full stakeholder engagement model. Government-sponsored companies, nonprofit-owned companies, family-controlled, mission-driven firms and employee-owned companies. This fourth sector is something we need in human business today. Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light. This is Chuck and Travis started this organization in 2007. Mark and his wife are involved in the Washington, D.C. Group. Our mission is to be faithful stewards of creation by encouraging indigenous stewardship values, energy conservation, efficiency, and renewables in Hawaii's faith communities. And this is in order. Conservation, efficiency, renewables. That's the order that organizations should adopt behaviors. Renewables is a huge capital offense. Do the low-cost, no-cost stuff first, then do the low-cost stuff, then do the high-cost stuff. Don't do the high-cost stuff first, then do the low-cost, because you'll never get there. 44, I think, IPLs now. These are the websites. 15,000 congregations. And I like this slide. And here's where they filled the capped carbon. We call this the fossil fuels layer. I really think that's, I don't know if you guys saw The Age of Stupid a few years ago, but that was kind of a very interesting future-looking film that was really calling our time really stupid. You know, could be. I don't know. Are we that? We don't know. Who are we? Terry Tempest Williams, The Eyes of the Future Looking Back at Us. I really like that. It really, really speaks to me as a Native American. Leaving room for life that is destined to come. I really, really think that, for me, that's a motivating piece of poetry for what I do. I just want to remind us all that if we had listened to what the Earth Charter Commission had come out with, I don't know, 30 years ago when sustainable development first kind of hit the scene, we'd probably be at a different place. So we really, I think, need to take care of understand who we are, where we're going, what we prefer, and how we get there. Here we are. And we have these two choices, growth or relationship building. And we're here. Are we going to choose this or are we going to choose that? What's our vision? What do we hope to see in the future? What do we want to see? Are we talking to other people about what we want? And if you want to learn something about sustainable development, I put these book covers together. So I think that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I can answer.